Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of how not to fail your Angular interview. Actually, I should have said how to always pass it going forward. So, as you already know, I'm a CTO at Cobiro. I just came back from NG Poland, which was an amazing experience. Check out those videos once they are uploaded. Once they are there, I'm gonna link it. But I mean, the cool stuff here is we want to get back to those interviews, right? So I got a lot of good feedback from you guys. It's awesome. Thank you for that. Keep it coming. Keep it letting me know I'm creating a good content. I'm happy to help. So let's get back to our journey of getting you a better developer and passing them interviews going forward. All right. So some of you might not remember, I will link those videos to the previous within this mini series, but today we want to talk more about this presentation layer. It's been requested from quite a few people from you guys, and it feels like it's missing in my previous videos as well, so I will talk a lot more about presentation layer. So how do you know you do well? Well, if your components look like those from Angular components, like Angular Material, for example, there's also a pretty good library, ng Bootstrap as well. So check out those two. And then if you can understand how the presentation is being made in these components, you will be really well off. The problem is, I've never seen it in any single interview I'm actually doing here at Cobiro. So I really feel like there's a lot knowledge gap, and I don't think it's so difficult, to be honest. You just have to understand the core concept of presentation and then just go with it. And once you learn that, you're gonna be much better developer. So let's get started. Let's understand what is it about the components in presentation layer, and then I'll be more than happy to help. So let's get to it. Okay, so let's have a look what we're actually building here. So the design looks like this. This is the tree structure that we've explained in the previous videos, but generally think about it like this. There is an item, and then this item 1 has a child called item 2, then item 2 has a child called item 3, and then item 1 has a sibling, item 4. Item 4 doesn't have any children, and the same way item 5 is a sibling to both item 1 and item 4, and it has a one child called item 6, and then item 6 has 2 children, item 7 and item 8. So if you think about it, it doesn't matter that the numbers are like increasing. It really doesn't matter. The tree should be rendered the same way, no matter what order it comes in from the backend. So that's pretty much what we're going to be building, and we have this implementation right here. So the way it works is I've been refactoring this application, and I moved the smart component to this UI layer into the items, and I made a whole module for it. So the smart component looks like this, nothing fancy. We have the observable of the data, and then we have a service that we call through. And then we just reactively fetch the data and model it as a tree. It's right there. We're gonna touch that bad guy eventually. And then when we actually, so the items is like tree structure. And then when we look at the template, we have something called app level. So here we use the data binding through input into the presentational component. So let's have a look at how it looks. So we have an app level right here, and I already see a red flag here. Why this component does not have any logic? If it doesn't have any logic, so we don't even need an init on it. We can see a candidate didn't bother to remove it, which is okay. But it's a bit of a smell of your practices, right? I mean, as a good developer, you would probably care about it. And then also we just pass on those items to the template. It's usually a red flag. Let me show you what I mean. So let's open this one. Yeah, sure enough. So this is bad. Why? And what's wrong with it? Well, first of all, when I'm in presentational component, I really want to make sure I am extendable. The first thing you should have in mind is it's extendable. And then, of course, easy to maintain. It has a single purpose to exist. And it's also, reusable, because the reusability is very important, but it should be also easy to extend. So this component is not extendable. It is reusable. All right, I can say I can take that piece and move it somewhere else in my application, and then just see it. So let's say I have a use case where I would like to make, in my items component, let's say, I would like to make a new one just in the bottom, maybe on the side or whatever, it doesn't matter. I would like to just reuse it here, obviously aside of the fact of double subscription, and then I would like to present a list on the bottom. Yeah, sure enough, the list is doubled, so it is reusable. Now, the problem is it's not extendable, because very rarely anyone will ask you to make the two lists looking like that. They will ask you, I would like to make a second list that is slightly different. Maybe the templating of it, I would just like to show a button, or maybe I would just like to show, I don't know, a card, or it would like to change the implementation so the data model behind it is the same, but the representation of, presentation of it is different. So this will not work. Why it will not work? It's because people don't understand a very simple concept. It's called content projection. Hear me out. When you use any HTML5 element, like div or span or whatever, whichever, when you use it and it's meant to be a container, clearly like up level is, it's a container to render tree structure. I can clearly say that. Then it should contain a presentational extendability. So how to do it? You do it through content projection. In fact, you are using sort of a content projection right here. Look, this div, why it's not like this, where I say up level and pass on the data there? I don't do it. This is content projected. Look. It's inside opening and closing tags. That's how it works. This is like, okay, this is not content projection in HTML5. Angular is using content projection, but think about it this way. So when I use open a tag, I let it be some things inside, encapsulate in this tag, and then I close it. Why it's not the same here? Why this here is always empty? This is anti-pattern. This is a big no-no. It means you don't understand content projection, and it's one of the first things you should really learn when you actually do it. So yes, you create reusable components, but you close them for modification. Look, first of all, it's empty, so okay, you could start adding logic here, but generally, think about it this way. You close it. I cannot render anything else than app item in here. And for the record, what is an app item? App item is this item right here, this whole row of data. So I cannot change it. If I want to render just a button, I would have to go here and change it. But then, oops, I did the same problem. Now both lists will have buttons. I cannot just, change the presentation of it. So I will go ahead and create another component called, I don't know, level button component HTML, and just duplicate that logic. And that is not maintainable. It's really difficult to maintain. You're gonna go to two places if you wanna do changes, and then this will go train wreck. This is terrible. So what can we do about it? Well, I'm gonna show you just now. So what we really wanna do is to use content projection. So the idea is that this element here should be decoupled from level component. So think about it like, what does level component do? So the first thing, the only thing it really does is to go through all the items it's being passed on. Then it finds the dot children for it. And then obviously it renders the actual item, and then it goes to this item's children and then calls itself recursively. So this is a recursion. So a level component calls itself another level component. So it creates a new sort of template for level component, and then pass on the children that are pass on the items that are actually children of the rendered item. So this is a trick which is pretty common and pretty used in most of the places. But I mean, there are a couple of problems. As I mentioned, coupling is one of the problem, and the other problem is this thing. You actually, the level component needs to know that there is something called .children, which is not that bad if you use type safety, but it's a bit of an issue. So what do? This actually is a very hard problem. The content projection itself, like doing something like removing an element and then putting ng content in there, is not hard. This is basic. But the problem is this part. It's in order to content project something, you would have to put a content projection here as well. And it's quite hard. You would have to really understand it and go deep into it. But let's say you do that interview, you don't have time, and what do? Well, first thing I would do is to find if someone did that better, or someone solved it, someone really good solved it. And the first thing, I would go to things like Angular Material or CDK, Angular CDK, and then find it if it's solved. And actually, it turns out it is. There is a CDK tree that I'm going to use to show you the concept of what you can do. Obviously, sometimes some employers don't appreciate that so much. Maybe they would like, maybe that's actually a catch in the whole interview. I would first consult that with the employer and ask them if it's okay to use a library like, I don't know, Material, CDK or whatever. And then if they say it's totally fine, okay, then you go ahead and do it. But it's definitely easier to do it this way. So let me show you how is it, because if the employer expects you to solve that problem, it's pretty hard actually. But okay, let's see what you can do. Okay, so actually we don't need that up level one. So I'm just gonna bring it up to you pretty straightforward. So what you need to do is to create something called CDK tree. CDK tree is the component that is responsible for rendering the tree. What does it require? Well, it requires the data, so you need to provide a data source. In our case, it's just items, so that's pretty cool. And then it needs something called tree control. I'm gonna get to it later when I'm gonna be building the component. Then we need to show it a template, like the thing that it needs to render. And there are two types. One is the flat tree node, and the other one is the nested tree node. Because we want to demonstrate this recursion problem, I'm going to use the nested tree, but flat tree would do pretty fine actually too. So notice a couple of things here. So we have a component which is like sort of a template place for having that, and then we have this thing. This is called a structural directive. It's structural because it has a star. So a structural directive wraps this whole thing in ng template, and then it can bind like data into the ng template. It's pretty cool actually. So it's gonna render it only if there are some children. If there are no children, it will not render. So think about it like a template for a single item that needs to appear. So it's like people don't use directives. I really don't understand why. It's like one of the coolest thing. Actually, I don't know if you know, but quite often you can be asked on an interview, what is the difference between directive and component? And component is a directive actually, and directive just doesn't have a template pretty much. There are a couple of like twists to the story. First of all, there are two types of directive. There is attribute directive and structural directive. This is a structural one, so it does manipulate the virtual DOM quite heavily. It's working as a template that you can reuse. So saying it doesn't have a template, well, technically it takes whatever is inside of it. Here we go. Then we need to make this like it was in the level component, like the level list. It's just a class. We can tackle this eventually. And then we need to render the app item component. So this will only render like it will only render the root nodes as well. and then if we want to tell tree where to render the rest, like the child nodes and stuff, and we want to just render it under. So then we have ng container, which is just a dummy component. It's nothing fancy, but the real thing is this one, CDK tree node outlet. It's a directive. This time the directive is used just to find, so it's sort of like in Angular world here. Just go ahead and actually check it if you're curious about how it's done. But generally, we use it just to tell the tree where to render the rest, pretty much. So this is it for the template part. Let's see what we can do with the component. Okay, so in the component, we're pretty good actually, because we have a data source. We just tell CDK tree, this is the data, but the tree control, this is pretty interesting. So what is this thing? So tree control is telling Angular CDK tree how to find children. Okay, it's more complicated than that, but in this case it's just this. So it allows CDK tree to understand how to find the children. This is actually a masterpiece made by these guys. So think about it this way. You see this one, it's actually logic, if you think about it. So we sneakily put on the logic, and it's closing some gaps for us. So it's great because we expect an interface to have .children, but then you see, imagine you have something that is not called .children. Maybe it's called .items or whatever else. You see, you will have to map that in your smart component, or maybe in a service. You will have to map that to other properties. So you actually, under the scenes, you make couplings with the model. And in here, they actually decouple that by providing a new directive that allows the tree to understand how to get children. So bear with me, check it out, what you can do. What you can do here is to define a nested tree control, which will be nested tree control of item. That's cool. So you see, it's using the generics. So actually, nested tree control doesn't know much about item as well. It just knows I have some sort of model, and that's it. And then the magic happens here. So what you do is, it's really a function. So think about it like this. Nested tree control is new nested tree control of items, and then you pass on a array function. So what you do is you have a node item. You can also say it's actually item, and then what you want to return is node.children. So if it was node.items, I can change it in my component because it is a logic. It's a getter logic. So I can just change it here, and then I don't have to go into my template and do that as well. So it's pretty neat. Actually, it's really good. So check it out. Let me see. Here we go. I render that, and it's rendered now with the CDK tree. You can see it in here. You see, it's using that template. Isn't that great? I think it's amazing, to be honest. Think about it like okay, this might seem like less code, but it doesn't matter really. It's not extensible. So look at this. I mean, here is pretty clear. I have like the main tree. Then I have nicely content projected the structural directive of the component, and then I can just, alter that, and I don't have to worry about going to level and stuff. So let's get to this example where I told you I would like to just render the bottom, not the whole thing. So instead of doing that, let me maybe change. Oh, I need this one. So let me just put the button, which it's gonna be like the ugly default button, and then in here I'm gonna say, because I know the type of node is the item, so I can just say .title. Check it out. Here we go. I render exactly the same, but just using the buttons. This is awesome. This is how you do it. So yeah, it's been a very good tip actually to do it. So this is how you should render the trees. If you're really curious how it's actually done, I really encourage you, go ahead and download like a fork or git clone the Angular repo, go to the CDK folder, and then just, you know, analyze it. It's actually a masterpiece. It's really awesome. Okay, but it's not the end. Actually, we should go deep down and look into the app item and figure it out what can we do there, because as you can see, hey, we still not content project anything there. So let's open it up. Let's do some more stuff, and I will show you how to solve a lot of problems there. All right, so let's tackle some more issues. First of all, as I mentioned, this doesn't use content projection. It's not such a big problem, but if you can think about it, like, again, we close the extensibility. Whenever we, so let's say I have an app item, and then I pass on an item, in this case, in the concept of a node. And then app item needs to know about internal structure of this node, which is quite often okay when you use something like a view model and stuff. But generally, this item is all over the place, you know, and like it seems like quite a lot of like components know about it. And if you look here, it's very simple template, right? So let me show you in here. So because I'm passing on an information about its whole item, but all I use is item.title. So if I would like to change that and maybe add like item 1 and ID 1 or whatever, and its ID, so now I will have to go change it. Well, I could model that in my view model, and the other way is I could go to app item, a single one, and just add it there. And this is what most people do, and it's not such a big mistake, but if you can think about it, like it has a, like, it doesn't have a big future, because this model you start bloating it with more properties. First of all, you pass on way much more than you need to, and then what you could do is to actually input only the title of it, which would make sense as a string, but then maybe you would like to inject something else. Maybe in some cases I would like to show an image, not just a text. So then I would start having ngIf in here, and try to avoid ifs in general, everywhere you do. If means, so when you use if, you add complexity to your code. So cyclomatic complexity grows, well, generally code complexity grows. So try to avoid ifs, actually. This is a good advice. So what you can do in here, what I would like to do actually, I would like that app item doesn't know anything about the item at all. That could be cool. And then I would like to just project whatever I want. So I could just say node.title. I would like that to work, you know, because even if I want to add some more data, or maybe model it differently, maybe make a span around it if I need to, I don't want to go to app item and change that. I'd like this to be extensible. So how can I achieve that? Well, it's actually very, very simple. Check it out. All you have to do is to add ng content. It might seem unnatural to put a tag inside the H3, but trust me, it's pretty cool. Check it out. I have it here, and now if I would like to create two lists, in one I'm going to show item 1, and in the other one I'm going to show just the IDs, I can do it. Check it out. All I can do is to copy this whole list, and then in here I would like to show IDs. Check it out. Now I have two lists. In one I have this, in the other one I have this, just using content projection. It's actually pretty powerful. I mean, the example here is very tedious, but the concept is very powerful. The idea is don't close through inputs, don't close your presentational components with you know, specific implementation. Open it up through content projection. It's pretty cool, and actually this one also will solve quite a lot of problems in terms of like this navigation. But let's get to the component so I can show you what I mean. Okay, so in the component you can see we have still some legacy here. So we have this data service that we totally got rid of because we use the input item, which is tons of times better, because now this is presentational component. But if you have a look, okay, I have a bit of a like potential logic in here, but in general it looks ugly like it was with the level component is because it's not doing anything, right? Its only responsibility was to, well, it used to do a lot, but now it doesn't do anything. And if you follow what I say, you will know that it is an anti-pattern. So we have to put some logic in here. So what I would like to do is that whenever I click that button, my item component know about it, so it can reroute me at this moment. So let's have a look what we can do. So what we can do is to actually create an output. For now I'm just using Boolean, it doesn't really matter. So I'm using output. I output when it's clicked, so I make like this sort of an event here, and then in here I emit it when that happens. So with that going forward, I will not need this router logic in here. I certainly don't need any of this, so I don't need mgn in it, and as we already mentioned, I don't need this input. So that's pretty cool actually. So now let's bind it in the smart component. Okay, so let's move to the template of the smart component, and in here we can bind that event that we've just created. We can create a handler called onItemSelected, and then we can just pass on the node from here. Like we already have it, so maybe there is no need to put it inside the app item. Maybe the app item shouldn't really know about it. So that should be fine. And then in here, we know we need to get the items and redirect to the router. So let's create the router, and then let's create the handler. And then in the handler, let's just reroute to that route. So now when we have a look at it, nothing happens as usual. And then when I click that button, here we go, I get redirected. So that's pretty cool. So have a look at this. I mean, this is way less code, a lot more reactive. We also handle routes where it's supposed to be, which is on top level of UI, which is a smart component. And then in here we're using a lot of content projection. Even more, we use the tree data structure with the outlet. And then here we use the content projection. So if I would like to change that, I can easily do it. And then we use the events from presentational components without any separate service or anything. So that's pretty cool though. I think that's mostly it, but maybe let me show you one more thing, because we only talked about the directives, but let's do an example. It's gonna be silly, but for you to understand stuff. So one of the most underestimated concepts aside of ng content in presentational is the directive. So check it out. You see this logic right here? We just tell, hey, there is something called item highlight. So the way it should work is that when I click this item, it should add the class item highlight, which will actually highlight that element. And then when I click it again, it will unhighlight it. So it's pretty much like selecting, deselecting an item in the UI. So just for you to demonstrate, when I click this item anywhere or any of these items, it should like give the highlight border around it until I actually click it again, then it should toggle off. So this is a toggle on, toggle off feature. So what you can see normally in 99% of the cases is that people will add that logic in the template, exactly like this guy did here. So this is not good because it's not really reusable. Like if I want to have a highlight function maybe on the button in the same template or maybe somewhere else in my application, I will not be able to do it. So I started bloating a lot of presentational logic in this one component. So this is not pretty cool. So what we can do here is to use a directive. So let me go ahead and generate the directive. I've just generated it. It's called item highlight directive, and let's have a look what we can do. So what we can do is we can open. Let's start with the test. Before I was not doing tests, it's because I sort of already tested from the smart component perspective. I could do it the same with the presentational component, but yeah. Well, I could do it. I didn't do it. Anyway, let's have a look. So when I generate the directive, a typical case is that I want to create something that will wrap around it. So it's a pretty common case to create something called test component. So this component is really dummy component. Its only purpose is to get injected inside the test bed and then actually use the directive. So I could actually test this directive as a class, but I have no idea if I didn't do any mistake with, I don't know, input bindings or stuff like this. So what I would like to do is to actually use the full integration approach to it, that, you know, I have a wrapping component around it. It's pretty common actually. Then I want to set up my test bed. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the test component and the directive right from here. Then I want to make sure the things get set up. And then I want to have a test that will test that the feature should be toggle. It should toggle on and off the highlight. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to get the directive based on the selector. So I can use the by directive, and I call it on the fixture, and the fixture represents the wrapper around the test component. So now it will find this element where directive is present. And then I want to make sure that the item highlight class is not present. And then when I click on it, I want to make sure that it is present. And then when I click on it again, I want to make sure it's not present again. So this is it. This is all my tests. So when I run this, that should certainly fail. Yeah, sure enough, it says like, hey, so it fails already in here. So this one passes because it's not containing item highlight, but when I click on it, it fails in here. So let's go to the implementation. So when I want to build the directive, and it's pretty powerful actually, I should use the renderer too. You can use so aside of renderer 2, you should also use element ref. Element ref represents an element on which directive is used. So back in a test, it will represent this element. Oh, I should say this whole component really, but generally the element here with the div. It's pretty cool. And you can just call it directly and call native ref and stuff, but if you use attribute directive, use renderer too. The reason is because the idea behind Angular is that it can run in multiple environments. You could be building using native script, you can be building mobile apps and stuff. Renderer 2 abstract this fact away from you, so you can, it's optimized, and you can use it also for things like maybe mobile app with native. It will native script, it will not create so much pain when you want to reuse the code. So yeah, it's good to use this abstraction. They build it for this purpose. So, and here I want to use the host listener. So this represents exactly the same as if I would just call the click, handle the click event. And then in the click, all I want to do, I need some sort of a toggle flag, right? So let me create private is clicked false. So default, it's not selected. And then when I click it, I want to toggle, change the value. So if it's false, it's going to become true. If it's true, it's going to become false. And then I want to say if it's clicked, then renderer add class on the native element, on the element ref on the native element on it, and add the item highlight. And if it's not clicked, just remove that class. Simple as that. And then when we move to the tests, sure enough, we're passing. Isn't that great? So now it's pretty powerful. This was a weird thing. Okay, now it's pretty powerful. So what we can do now, I can demonstrate that it works. So when I think I have to refresh that thing. Oh no, sorry, of course, I didn't bind it in a template. So let's go here. It's still using this old syntax. What we can do is to totally get rid of it and then use the new directive. It's pretty cool. You see, I click and unclick. I click, I can click several of these. It's pretty cool. So why directive is so cool is because maybe I decide not to do it on the highlight. Maybe I decide to do it on the button well, it will redirect me, so maybe let's just use it on H. So check it out. Now, you see, it does work when I click on the H1 or H2, whatever. It doesn't work anywhere. So now I can reuse this directive. It's pretty cool, actually. I could even use it in multiple places. So this is how you decouple the behavior, like presentational like behavior, from your components. So that was mainly it. We still didn't talk about structural directive. For this, I would encourage you to go into the CDK tree and figure it out. It's much more advanced topic, but with all this, I think you should be good to go. So let's sum up what we've learned. So what we've learned is content projection. So basically, it's important if you want to make extensible presentational components. What we've learned is also not to it allows us to not to bubble the events from child components to the presentational ones. We also learned not to use presentational components as a template just only for that. We learn how to reuse it. We learn how to modify it, so extend it. It also will help you with maintainability in a big time, really. We also learned about how to use CDK, nested tree and its outlets, and also the structural directive for it. We also learned how to use the directives, and this is still shouldn't be here. So we also learned that we shouldn't pass on the inputs as the models and then render that inside. Think of it like a grenade, like you just throw a grenade inside your component and then let it explode. So it can be sort of like under control within that component, but if you want to reuse it, it's gonna go against you. So we also learned not to use it if we don't have to. So with all these topics, together with the directives and how to do TDD on the directive, you should be well equipped with doing at least 90% of the layouts right there. If you master how to differentiate between the directive presentational components and also how to use container presentational components like list holders or and then decouple it from the list items, you're going to be very well off. You're going to be the less than 2% of people that apply for our jobs. So this is not a very difficult concept though. Like once you learn it, you will have a very good conversation starter with your future employer. And I'm really sure that if you use the arguments I gave it to you right here, I'm pretty sure you're going to pass it. I think this is really what should get you through 90% of the cases. And bear in mind that the test we have here that we used to do, it is fairly advanced. A lot of people failed this test and they call themselves senior, and they very much are senior in most of the companies. So if you think about it, like if you master the concepts that I've talked, not only in this presentational part, but also in my previous parts, and then if you follow up with the next and I guess the last part where we talk about the modeling the data, I think it's already senior level, to be honest. So it's not very difficult, but you have to take your time to master it and understand it thoroughly. And I hope you learned something today. Please do leave a comment and send me a message if you really want to know more or something is unclear. I'll be more than happy to help. So yeah, stay curious, and I hope to see you next.